Yo. They ain't ready for this one. This would be a limit, then me spitting on them too. You never even thought that it could still happen to you. Run up in your neighborhood and show you how it do. Then we'll never think of stopping until you're showing left us through. They said they want equality, then hating on all men. That's burning down the culture, destroying it from within. I'm trying to make this nation great for all my next to kin. It's time to walk away from the true hate, the Dems. For all the liberals out there, tell me that you listen in. Cause this is where the future of unity will begin. Hey, yeah, walk away, walk away, walk away.
I was gonna ask before we start, was Rico able to watch it or not?
I told you, I ain't too interested in that right now.
I hear you, man. You only have so much time for all the debates people are doing, you know? I don't watch most of them myself.
This is an interesting one. Don't get me wrong. I'm very interested in seeing how Jangles holds up against, a professional liar.
And also, I think this is Lindsay's first debate. I don't know of him doing any debates before this.
It is his first actual debate. He's gone on interviews. He's been interviewed and still did quite terrible. Just like he's just awkward in the interviews. But this is his first actual debate.
Has he done any interviews that were less than 100% fawning though?
No.
Not really. No.
No.
It's all Fox News and Dave Rubin, right?
Well, and like smaller conservative channels.
Did you say mother? He got interviewed by his mom.
I would be surprised.
I'll say this: he basically, so because I mean, like, there's no poisoning now. He basically came out and read a bunch of quotes off his phone before basically explaining what words mean, and got the crowd on his side pretty much. Well, not the crowd.
He didn't have to get the crowd on his side like that. I'm guessing that crowd is pretty heavily.
The crowd was absolutely already primed on his side.
There was some people. I would say there's a lot more than it has been in other showings. Like, it wasn't anything like the Christiosity Vadim crowd, because that was.
I didn't see that one.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I'm unfortunately I'm one of those people where debates is my video games. So,
I did see the I think it was the year before that. I did see the Sargon Thomas Smith one.
Yeah,
which was tough to watch, honestly.
But I just to let you know, Jangles kind of got a little more in his feelings than he should have, and in two times he got in his feelings with James, and then they had a panel. They had the last two panels. One was supposed to be America versus China, and nobody even was there to defend China. And the last panel was, I guess they picked four of the most over the top right, or five of the most over the top right wingers they could get together into a group, and just let them wing it for about an hour and a half.
No, I'm sure the moderator was there to reel them in. No.
No.
What?
Absolutely not.
What?
The moderator was worse than them.
Who was the moderator?
I honestly, I don't know who many of these people were. It was like,
yeah, I had that.
I knew
too.
a couple of them, because it was the one girl from Australia. I can't remember her name.
Sydney Watson.
Yeah, Sydney Watson. Oh my god!
It's really fucked that I know that. It is.
It is kind of fucked that you know that. I'm pretty into this stuff, and she's obscure by my taste.
Yeah, me and her had a little fucking bumping heads at one point, but
She blocked me 2 tweets in.
I have never interacted with this person. I have no idea who she is.
Oh, it's don't. If you plan on being blocked, go ahead. But if you kind of don't want to have your block record go up, you're
not missing anything. She's just another bargain brand right wing Barbie.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like a Lauren Southern with
Australian.
Australian.
Well, she is Australian though, right? Doesn't she live in Australia now?
I think
she moved there to be closer to the Christchurch killer.
Right. She did move to Australia to start over fresh.
But yeah, so it was her, John Doyle.
John
I
fucking Doyle.
think I'm gonna be wrong about this, but I think it's Posobiec. No, it can't be Posobiec.
Posobiec, was he there?
Posobiec was
Yeah.
there. He was definitely there.
Of course he was there.
And then they had two other people. This black guy that was a rapper.
Zuby?
No.
I know
it
who
was-
you're talking about because I saw him on the poster and I looked him up. Yeah, he's like a 17-year-old, right?
Yeah, he's
Wow, that's fucking obscure. Now that's obscure.
Mm-hmm.
not as much anymore.
They couldn't get Zuby, so it's a sub Zuby conservative rapper.
Yeah, like
there's another conservative rapper.
He's not quite the Jordan Peterson of rap. He's more like the Greg Gutfeld of rap.
Oh, that's bad.
all of them are bad. Imagine Kool Moe Dee at 17 years old
Oh, Jesus.
with brain trauma. And that's basically how he raps. Like I've got to find it, but I've heard like a few of his things, and I'm like, oh man, this makes Zuby seem like a decent rapper. They had that guy, and I do not know who's the moderator. But like the whole time, I started tweeting to Mythicist like, why do you have a moderator? Like the four people. The only thing I could say that should have been moderated that wasn't was like the guy that I think is Posobiec, but I'm not all the way sure. He was getting angry, like physically angry, getting out of his chair and yelling, but there was like no one to yell at because everybody was agreeing with him. So he was gradually getting angrier and angrier and angrier at his own straw man, I guess. So I mean, I guess that would be the only thing that I would say that the moderator had to stop. Like, hey, chill out.
Wait.
Side note on that.
Was this Is America at its breaking point? Is that the event we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Here's what it says on their site. Panelists: Elijah Schaefer, Sydney.
Elijah Schaefer. That's
Yep. Lisa Reynolds. I don't know who that is. And then Chandler Crump. That is the rapper we were talking about.
yeah.
Chandler Crump.
Chandler Crump.
What?
Is that his actual name or his rap name?
I hope it's his actual name because
Neither is good.
No.
But I would say this: I would expect, like, if they asked him, he would say something like "Colored Trump." You don't get it? Like, I to that point, that's how bad he. Like, I'm expecting something like that to be the reason why his name would be Crump, other than like that's his actual name.
I was gonna say, side note on that. You said he was getting angry at his own straw man. It's just funny you say that. I remember listening to, I think Chapo, I can't remember who it was exactly, a long while back, but they brought up the fact that, you know, right wingers can't do, the main reason they can't do comedy and things like that is because they get viscerally fucking angry.
Oh, that's what is his name? Some more news guy.
Yeah, he said that they get too angry because, I mean, that's what they fucking deal in anger. So it's not really that surprising that they would get angry at their own made up version of you know, the left and all that.
The only thing they have is like, look at who I've triggered. So if they don't trigger anybody, they got to kind of sit there with their own joke. And if it's a bad joke, like, what do you do? So you got to hope somebody gets mad, which is kind of what Jangles did. But we'll cover that later on, hopefully. But it's like,
I love that man, but damn it, I can't blame him. Who am I kidding?
I can a little bit because it's like, how did you not expect James Lindsay to bullshit? How did you not see that coming? Like, that's the one thing you should have just expected was like, oh yeah, James Lindsay gonna come and say some bullshit. Be prepared for it.
He's coming hot with bullshit, but hey, even then, it's hard. It's fucking hard.
It was.
I'm watching the video now, trying to figure out who the moderator is. I don't know who that lady is, but I'll say this: she's kind of a dime, though.
Oh, she's very attractive, but she's also crazier than. Well, I'm not gonna.
Crazier than sin, you know what I mean? Just fucking nuts.
I gotta be honest, I'm into that a little bit.
Sydney Watson's hot too, but she's also fucking batshit.
She's sitting right next to the moderator, and I gotta say she's not as attractive as the moderator. The moderator's looking pretty good. I gotta be honest.
The moderator's even more attractive.
She's pretty spicy, man.
Damn.
when you get further into this conversation, you're going to realize that there's like a certain level of insanity where it's like, oh, this is no longer cute or funny. These people are literally calling for war.
I mean, they can always call for war. I say go. I'm like, hey guys, if you're feeling froggy, then leap.
We won't win that, Rico. We won't win that. You know we won't.
Oh, neither was. I was gonna say neither was
Well,
they.
who's they?
The short-term domestic terrorism is all well and good, which is pretty much to be expected from this crowd. But none of them are actually committed to leading the charge. Not one of them. Not one of them. These people they profit on outrage, but they're not. Like, take for the instance with the recent instance of one dude during the Charlie Kirk's little fucking critical race story tour, literally saying explicitly, "Yeah, no, why aren't we killing these people yet? When do we start killing them?" And Charlie Kirk immediately fucking shuts that shit down because he's not trying to lead the charge on that. He's not trying to he's all for keeping people at the boiling point, but he is not trying to be the one to actually be behind that. He's not him. All of them, they will happily stoke this shit, but now one of them are trying to actually lead the charge on that.
I agree with you, Rico. But the thing is, the reason why I agree with Flowstar overall is because you're right. The guys on stage, the Charlie Kirks, they've got nothing. They'll fold immediately. But there's a whole. They're not the guys who are going to be doing the terrorism and the fighting. Like, there are absolutely people in the right wing ranks who will do that, and they're incredibly heavily armed. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, when we say we wouldn't win, like, define winning and losing. Are we going to lose people? Without a doubt. Like, would they kill people if you just measure it at that? Without a doubt, they'll kill people. Without a doubt. But that's not winning. You know what I mean? Just killing people randomly doesn't win wars. It's just a disparate fucking terrorist group at that point. But it doesn't win wars. It doesn't build strongholds. It doesn't maintain infrastructure. These motherfuckers, even when in charge, can't fucking keep their own lights on. You know what I mean? Well, you gotta define winning and losing a little better than just, oh, they have more guns, so they'll kill a lot of people.
No. It's not just they have more guns or anything like that. It's these people genuinely have the ability to survive without certain
some of them.
Well, the ones I'm worried about definitely do. Like, I could care less.
They have about the capabilities of maybe pulling off pulling an Al Qaeda and just kind of hiding in between, mixing themselves within crowds and whatnot, within places to try to, blend in and whatnot. But that's about it. And at that point, it just becomes a guerrilla warfare. Dealing with them just popping out, doing random acts of terror. They don't have any defined idea of what they're doing or even what the enemies are. They just, you can't lash out against the entire world, which is what they basically want to do. Lash out against, they want to kill literally everyone that's not them. And that's not only fucking impossible to do, it's just incredibly stupid and counterproductive. They turn everyone against them. They don't have any defined enemies, and that's their whole fucking problem. They're incoherently violent. You know what I mean? They will kill everyone. They'll just kill anyone and everyone that they can. And unfortunately, not having strategic goals, not having any kind of idea as to what you even want. Like, take January 6th as a prime example of motherfuckers who came out like literally admitting, saying they had no idea what they were doing when they were there. Most of them had no fucking clue what to even do once they got to their objective. They got in, and then what? You know what I mean? And then what comes next? Even if they had gotten a hold of some politicians and maybe killed someone, and then what? And then what? They don't think about the and then what. They just think, we got to kill these people who are stealing our elections, trying to force vaccines on us and our kids, and bloody fucking blah. And that's they are only primed for short-term thinking. And that, to me, says that, yeah, in the short term they could do some serious damage, but they wouldn't win any such waged war.
I mean,
I think
I don't
think
think they're.
Lozar's only point was that a violent skirmish between Americans would be really ugly, and
Yeah,
Oh, without a doubt.
it's something we should be trying to avoid at heavy cost.
Well,
I mean,
well,
we are. That's the thing. We are trying to avoid it. The rest of us are. They're the ones who are in an echo chamber, fucking hyping each other up to get somebody to go do it.
well, definitely. But I'll say this: with spending enough time as I have with a lot of certain leftists and especially Black Twitter, we have a strange habit of getting into the idea of believing that we're a lot tougher than we are.
They
So,
say the same with them.
yeah, but the difference is this: they train. Like I've actually been around a lot of these people, and every week they are training. They are learning from military tactics. They are training military tactics. This is their video game.
Lozar, did you join a right wing militia? What are you doing on the
Oh,
weekends?
no. I live in Ohio. I've been around Central Ohio. I've been in West Virginia. I've been around a lot of these people, and the jobs that I've
Again,
taken.
and I'm saying the same, and my point remains the same. Just despite that, training to kill is not the same as training to build an actual stronghold, to build a country, to run a country, to take over a country.
Sure, but
training to kill.
I forget. Were you in the army or were you a Marine?
Marine Corps.
All right. So you
That's what I'm saying.
have a background in this stuff.
Yeah,
that's why I'm like,
their goal isn't to.
They're not trying to.
You know what? I should be a little more specific. Their goal isn't to create a better nation. Their goal is to remove certain elements from their nation they disapprove of. That they'll succeed in doing.
That works against them hugely.
Why does it work against them?
Because like I said, in the short term, that does damage, but it doesn't. What you need with regards to wars is not just superior firepower. If that's all it took, if just being the better at killing was all it took, I mean, we'd never lose any wars. We'd have never lost Afghanistan.
And I think,
you know what I mean? Things like that, like just being trained to kill doesn't make you better.
The point that I'm trying to make is in game for them is not. I don't even think they thought that far about.
They haven't. And that's what I mean.
Creating a new nation or anything, but they have thought far enough to who can we diminish? Who can we diminish? Which is something that should definitely be worried about. Who can we diminish to the point of not having to worry about them challenging our way of life? And that's all they want to do. They just.
I know that for me, like I'm kind of worried that like a civilization in America is sort of holding on by a thread, and that like if something were to pop off, I could see it being pretty successful in destabilizing everything.
I don't.
Yeah.
Really?
Nope. Unless the destabilization was towards critical infrastructure, that's about it. But other than that, generally, the destabilization would be very, very, very short term at best.
What makes you so optimistic about that? Like I look around and it just seems like our country is falling apart. It seems like America might be on the brink.
Before you answer that, never do the I look around. Because it's very hard to see how the rest of the world works. Because again, I live right in between Central Ohio and Northeast Ohio, and Northeast Ohio is you really can't see like a lot of the more over the top. Oh, this person really wants to kill a lot of people. Like there's no other argument there. But when you get closer to Central Ohio, it's like, oh, these people just need a reason. Like they need an excuse. So
they're eager. They're hungry.
It's very different.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, what was I about to say?
I asked
Oh,
you
what was
what made you so optimistic about these things.
why we're not at the brink. At this point, I would have believed you. I would have definitely believed that, we're at the brink based off of uh just our nation's response to COVID alone. But the crazy thing is over, depending on which projections you go off of, we're at basically over 700,000 to over 1 million people dead from the virus, and nothing has meaningfully changed.
I full on
You know
disagree
what I
with that.
mean? It's like,
Um,
I mean, like our supply lines, like hospitals are overwhelmed, but especially in rural America, supply lines are a little fucked up. But that was also something that has been the case for a long time, and all COVID did was just make that a lot more apparent. And yet things are still standing tall in a way. It's just because there are a lot of barriers for things to just fall apart, and we have a lot. You know what I mean? A lot of contingencies, a lot of things that come in place that when things go down, and yet, and then those things seem to be working. You know what I mean? It's If things were to collapse, they would have done so by now. This virus, I thought, would have been the thing that would have definitely brought America down a bit, but didn't. In fact, you know what I mean? We're just still chugging along, and I don't think things would have been meaningfully worse, even if the virus had killed a couple million people. I think things would have still things would have just kept going.
well, no, because most history has ebbs and flows before like a major conflict kicks off. I would argue, we're probably more along the lines, if we're looking at a comparative station, we're probably about the 1820s in comparison. There's a lot of arguments, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of, hey, there's issues here. But
What
we
followed
haven't,
was domestic terrorism, but not societal collapse.
well, not just domestic terrorism, but there's really like not that much. Everybody's still, well, the people that really have the ability to change the nation really haven't gotten to that point yet, because there's still a bit of comfort.
Did you say the 1820s or the 1920s?
18.
Yeah,
The 1820s. Okay.
And the reason why I'm saying the 1820s, it's just America specific, to where there were major issues, but we tell ourselves we beat Great Britain twice. We overall,
I would think you mean I would think the 1920s would be a lot more. Basically, the early 1900s would be a lot more
well, no, because
comparable.
the only reason why I'm saying the 1820s is the Civil War. I don't think there's
Yeah,
really that much of a world conflict
There's
looming
no
in the,
there's no Civil War like scale thing coming. Definitely, I would think more the early 1900s, like the Nader period, with like springing up of domestic terrorism via basically like the rise of the KKK at their, but like this was them at their peak, going around just exercising, undoing the gains done by Reconstruction. They're going around killing people left and right. Lynchings, such and such. You know what I mean? Terrorizing politicians and such. That were trying to bring about more progressive change. Any gains gained by Black people was undone and all that. I would think the early 1900s would be a lot more. A much more applicable comparison than the Civil War, which was, whole states declaring war, coming together and then declaring war against the government, against the other states. You know what I mean?
well, it looked like war against the other states, but they chose states because people leaned more towards states than they do today. But it was more an ideological difference. And right now, our ideologies are by no means close to each other.
Yeah, I feel like we can't even talk to each other across a political divide today, and I think that has me worried, honestly.
Well, because unfortunately, we got into this idea that a lot of the issues in the United States were solved.
I would say we can talk about it. Just a lot of people suck at it.
Well, We can't
when I
talk
said we
about it
can't-
because
yeah, go on.
we can't talk about it because the people that talk about it the most have an agenda, and the people that talk about it the least have no idea what it is. So they just rely on the people that have an agenda to give them their opinion.
Yeah,
The people with the biggest
when we can't talk about it is that we can talk about it, but we don't understand each other, so the conversation is impossible.
And a
Mhm.
lot of that is because our media landscape is filled with fucking slack-jawed assholes who just kind of, like you said, Losar, have an agenda, and they're more concerned with their agenda than with actually, communicating their ideas in a way that is we're able to actually have a conversation about. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, and I think this is an
I'm gonna-
excellent segue to what I wanted to talk about: the Virginia
Oh,
election
yeah.
and the role that CRT and education played or didn't play in that election. What our different ideas are about it. 10 out of 10 segue.
For me, then I guess as someone has pointed out, it's just like a lot of the big issues with like schools being closed, like this, just in general. As far as like one of the factors that played into that election was the Democrats' response to COVID versus the Republican one, where in Republican places, and Republicans are basically don't want schools closed at all, and I just think the CRT is just it's just one of those things that was just while I was yelling before about how lying worked, about how just distracting from the fact that like the school, take for example the Democrats and Biden are the ones who through that first COVID package is the one who pushed the money to the schools to allow them to be able to reopen, to get the things that they need so that they could safely reopen, and yet that didn't fucking matter. You know what I mean? Even though the GOP voted against those measures, against all of the measures to help schools reopen safely, it didn't fucking matter because all they had to do was just whip people up in a frenzy about an obscure legal theory and framework, and that's all that needed to happen. It didn't matter that they were opposed to the material policies that actually helped schools reopen. What mattered is that it was stoking up this a bullshit fear about an indoctrination that isn't happening. Now, mind you, the Democratic response to that is absolute dog shit. But
what about the Democratic response did you think was so bad?
Oh my God, it's just look. It's just saying CRT isn't taught in schools is bad. It is on itself just not enough to really address. To really counter the narrative that it is being taught, whether that the fundamental root of it is the notion of that what people are being taught is that whiteness is evil, and that if you're born white, you're evil, and shit like that. And the Democrat response is not really was just basically to ignore those statements, to just kind of not really address it at all. And the few activists that do kind of speak in a way that almost frames white people in a negative light that would kind of trigger that kind of knee-jerk reaction. You know what I mean? The way we talk about whiteness, and I'm just like, yeah, no, that's it's not good. It's really not that great. Just kind of framing whiteness, this kind of esoteric thing that even white people have long since kind of just aren't even aware of as this evil, all-encompassing thing, without really offering an alternative to it, because it's just, you can dissect whiteness or how white America was built. Built off of exploitation, slavery, so on and so forth, built off a police state and just brutal fucking brutal capitalism and whatnot.
Wait, can I jump in here and read something that I think is relevant? You guys can sound off on this. This is an excerpt from someone else. I'll say who it is later. What is the advantage to Democrats in talking about whiteness instead of saying, hey, black people have faced unfair disadvantage? A free and fair society needs to address this. Here's a program to help. It's a classic example of an academic concept that should have stayed in the graduate seminars.
Well, that's the thing. It did stay in the graduate seminars. That's what it was.
It's clearly gotten out, though.
It got out because the right wing, because some fucking right wing think tank decided to just make it the
I can
thing. They
agree with you on
the
that
ones
one,
who,
Rico.
you know what I mean? Well, the CRT specifically, that to the extent of that legal framework, speaking on the how things were structured, of how things are structured around race, that is an obscure legal theory. That's where it was. But then people like Chris Rufo, James Lindsay, and so on and so forth just turned it into this all-encompassing boogeyman that is just everything.
But what
Whereas,
about people like Robin DiAngelo and Kendi,
Ibram X. Kendi.
yeah,
yeah.
Ibram X. Kendi, who are best-selling authors and whose ideas
Now, in their case,
yeah, go on.
yeah. I was saying in their case, I'm speaking on the matter of talking about whiteness and whatnot. Yeah, I don't like the way they talk about it, and they did. And their thing was
The question
not.
isn't whether or not isn't whether or not you like it. It is the point I was making.
I never heard of these people until right wing media made them out to be boogeymen. You know what I mean? Being corporate America definitely wants themselves some prominent diversity speakers and whatnot, people who speak on these issues, so that they can advocate for like symbolic changes, or be like, we incorporate this in our training and make white liberals feel good about, hey, I read this book. We all have this book. We all have the Black Lives Matter sign up and whatnot. But that's about the extent of their commitment to any such, structural changes. So I mean, it's like it's what do they call it, like the DEI industry, like diversity, equity, inclusion industry, and all that.
The DEI industry, yeah.
It's like it's a corporate. It's basically corporate. Corporate diversity. You know what I mean?
It's yeah. So I think
it's shallow.
It is very shallow. I think I agree with exactly half of what you're saying, and I think the other half is actually really important. Which is the first place I ever heard the term CRT, I'm pretty sure was from a Fox News segment, and this was around the time probably pre the 2012 election, and Fox News was saying that Barack Obama was some kind of agent of something called critical race theory, which was an evil anti-white people theory that came from Harvard University, and Barack Obama was forcing it on America. This was not a very successful campaign by Fox News, but like a lot of things, they kept with it over the years, and they kept hammering away at it. So you're kind of right. I kind of agree. Fox News invested in the right wing, invested in this narrative.
Yeah.
But over that same period of time, it's also true that a lot of these concepts gained substantial purchase in mainstream American culture. And earlier I made a note of it. You called CRT an obscure legal theory, and I think in the year 2021, that's not really correct. I don't think it is that obscure.
It ain't obscure anymore.
Well,
It's
that's
not
for sure.
Well, first, it's not a theory at all. It's a movement.
I would call it a loosely collected, like, academic field is how I tend to define it.
Yeah. What's happening is something that's always happened. I don't know if anybody remembers the Muslims are going to work with the gay agenda while working with Black Lives Matter to create a cabal that is going to turn us all
Sharia law.
into
That's why they were gonna do a pro gay version of Sharia law where everyone has to be trans.
To create a gay Muslim caliphate.
Mandatory.
I remember that.
Yeah. So
gay dictatorship.
What I'm
Sharia
saying
law.
is, my point is, none of this is new. This has always happened, where somebody will find a few anecdotes of somebody taking something incredibly far and use it to scare the hell out of people into believing that their children are being attacked.
It's narrative warfare. It's narrative warfare.
It's narrative warfare. It's the same as the.
Yeah. Sure.
It's the same.
The problem.
Go ahead.
The problem with this one specifically is because leftists have a lot more, I would say, focused things that they want, but things that actually take time, things that actually take money and effort and energy. since we didn't see that rapid change once Biden got into office, we immediately became disaffected. So anything that looked like it didn't go 110%, like the moving out of Afghanistan, immediately made people on the left go up. Look at Biden failing us.
I think this problem
And-
predates the Biden administration by quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a
No.
separate. I definitely think that's a bit separate. And to
But-
be
but
clear, there's
we're-
a whole lot of leftists who are like committed. Even
No,
though
no,
Biden
no.
won, they want that man to fail.
Well, we're talking about why Virginia ended the way it did.
Yep.
Yeah.
So CRT did play its role, definitely, but it's always been things to rile up the right. But unfortunately, because leftists are so quickly apathetic with things that don't immediately go out perfectly, we weren't going to the polls. We weren't willing to challenge it. We literally looked up and went, well, we brought Biden in. Biden didn't do what we wanted to do. So that means
Well,
Democrats
that's the
are
thing.
failing us and Democrats are failures. There's no point in even trying to defend them. And
Well, that's the thing about that though is actually people came out for McAuliffe. The problem is Youngkin turned out more people. He turned out substantially more than what was expected because McAuliffe turned out the expected amount of people that would come. Like there wasn't a depression in votes for McAuliffe. Despite all the reasons that there would know that we say that there would be, like
there was one
bills and-
specific. There was one specific category of people that he desperately needed that didn't show up for him.
Wait, who's he?
And-
McAuliffe or
McAuliffe.
McAuliffe.
Okay.
And-
McAuliffe.
And that is white working class women.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, the suburbanites and rural rights came out in massive numbers for Youngkin. Especially the rural ones were especially motivated.
Because it's easy to scare the hell. And I know it sounds very mean, but it's the truth. It's easy to scare the hell out of a soccer mom. And
Sure. These are helicopter parents. The helicopter parents, oh yeah, you can you get them motivated real quick.
Yeah. So to me, this analysis it kind of avoids the meat of the
Addressing the elephant in the room here.
I mean, Democrats have problems with turnout, especially in off-year elections. That's not new. I haven't seen the actual turnout numbers. You said they were good, Rico. But
the turnout numbers were good.
I would imagine they were good compared to other off-year elections, but dramatically lower than, like, say 2020, for instance.
Yeah.
well, they basically had the same numbers in all the categories of, like, I guess you would call it the Rainbow Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
Like those categories were all pretty much even. The problem was the one
do you mean even from 2020?
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard
Was
for
actually-
me
yeah.
to believe, given what the 2020 turnout was.
Yeah, no, it was pretty much even except for one group.
Virginia
And it's a
election sees
large-
highest turnout in recent history. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Wow.
It was high. Like the numbers were good. The problem is Youngkin turned out he turned like the rural Virginians came out in massive numbers, and the key group that turned things around for him was the white suburbanites. You know what I mean? They came out. Like you said, like the soccer moms, the helicopter parents, all that. The parents came out. People were frustrated, by and large, frustrated with how the education system was being ran. Like, you get a lot of schools shut down, and then combine that with the CRT panic, and it was just basically frustration, and education curriculum just was the main thing.
No, I want to put
That,
an
motivated
asterisk
them.
on that number, though, because I'm reading the article. It was the highest of other gubernatorial elections. So when they say the highest, they're comparing it to 2017. They're not comparing it to 2020. So it was 55%. That's a very high turnout in an off year. The last in 2017 it was 47%. So it was a lot higher, but it was not 2020 numbers. Just
and
maintain context.
but I would say it's probably closer to Bush 1. If you look at the Bush 1 years right after 9/11.
That would be Bush 2, right?
Oh yeah, Bush 2, I'm sorry. Right after 9/11, you probably see more similar numbers because again, there's this group, this small group, mostly in this particular case, it was working class women, white women
Mhm.
who, and I have to keep saying it because I honestly believe it, who genuinely saw a lot of the things that look scary and went, oh, okay, well, these people are failing.
Okay, so the,
And
the numbers
that
I've seen, they break it down along like education level. Like white people who are college educated were voting Democrat in very high numbers. White people who don't have a college degree were voting Republican in very high numbers. And the other bifurcation that I saw was parents of public school students were far more likely in this election to support the Republican candidate. That's the other.
Well, that's exactly what I said
Yeah,
there.
it
It's
does agree with you. Yeah,
the parents.
yeah. But see, I
The
guess
pa-
what I find lacking about your analysis, Rico, is that isn't it the candidate's job to communicate to voters? So if you're
Oh yeah, no, McCarthy did not communicate well at all.
I would definitely agree with that. I'm guessing you followed the election closer than me because it's
Oh
your
yeah,
neighbor state.
I
You're right over the
I
border
did.
from them.
I disagree. I disagree. I,
You disagree
I
about
have
what,
to
though?
push back on it. That he had any way of being able to stop this CRT fear campaign.
But wait.
Well,
Because-
that's the big question.
Address this specifically. Do you think no CRT isn't being taught in schools is a sufficient message?
No.
No,
I don't.
but there is no sufficient
I
message.
disagree.
There really isn't.
What would yours be?
What'd you say?
No, fucking
Logic guy.
logic guy. What would your counter be to that narrative? I got mine, but what would yours be?
Okay, so I don't think Democrats can keep going around telling people that the thing they're seeing isn't that the things they see doesn't happen. I don't know if anyone in Virginia said this, but there's a quote from a very high profile teachers union president in Los Angeles where she said where people were concerned about learning loss during the shutdown, which is a very well documented phenomenon. Schools closing and kids learning from home over Zoom has been tragically terrible, specifically for underprivileged students. They're falling further behind. And her answer to this was learning loss isn't real. There's no such thing as learning loss. I don't know if anyone in Virginia was saying that, but I think that even if they weren't, Democrats have to be on damage control for things like that. We've got to take stuff like that. It is what is the job of a politician if not to address voters' concerns, not tell them they're not real. So learning loss isn't real, and there's no such thing as CRT in public schools isn't cutting it. You've got to look at, yes, I do see where certain not 100% sound ideas on race have gotten into the school curriculum, and we need to take it seriously, and we need to do things about it. And the other area where I think he really fucked up was in saying that parents. He implied that parents shouldn't have a say in school curriculum, and that is a class A political fuck up. That's not something you say when you're running for governor of a state. You bring people in and you make them feel like they're part of. Well, isn't the democratic process all about bringing people in and making them feel as if they're part of the process? Of course, you get a say in your kid's curriculum. Wouldn't you, as a parent, like Losar, you're the only one here as a parent, I think. You're not a parent, are you, Rico?
I am not.
But well, I got completely sidetracked by my parental.
No, you're good. You're good. Your point is basically that even implying that parents shouldn't have a more proactive role in school is a fuck up. That was a huge fuck up.
But you use the exact.
Wouldn't you care as is happening? This is not a rhetorical question. If right wingers on PTA boards and school boards were bringing in right wing ideology into your school, which happens all the time. It's not a hypothetical question at all. Don't you want to be involved in that and have a say in that?
A weird
If I
framing.
If I found out my kid was being taught PragerU, I would be very upset.
I'd freak the fuck out.
Okay, wait. I want to be very specific on this. That was a weird framing of how that's being said. So if my governor was saying, hey, a lot of the stuff being taught in schools isn't what this thing is, and unfortunately, since you don't want to pay attention to, like, if you genuinely don't want to hear this out, we're not going to completely change factual history because it makes you feel bad.
But that's
So
not what McAuliffe said, though.
no, that's not what he said, but that's what he's trying to say. Yeah, that's what he meant.
Yeah.
But
And
He could have
when you
communicated. That's
say,
what
when
I'm
you say
saying.
that's
Wait,
what
wait,
he's
wait, wait,
let me
trying to
finish.
say,
Let me finish. But unfortunately, the word imply exists. And this is why I said there's really no way of defending CRT right now, because no matter what you say, there's a way to twist it.
that's
And
always the case, though. Anything can be
not,
twisted.
I mean, anything can be twisted, but we're talking about something that 65% of the country is very adamant about making sure they don't feel uncomfortable about. So race conversations have always been something of discomfort, have always been something of a demotivation to be able to talk about it. So when you add that to, we're not just going to talk about the parts of race that we all love talking about, but we're going to talk about how race has affected our systems. That pushes against, and I remember I was saying this yesterday to you, that pushes against the idea of American exceptionalism. There's going to be a challenge to that 110%. But I do understand teachers and officials saying, I understand you feel bad about American exceptionalism being challenged, but this is actual history. This is actual science. This is actually how things are going through our systems. This can't be denied. So even if you feel bad about it, we can't deny that.
What you're doing, Losar, though, is that you're steel manning it. Look, some of these examples might very well be. I mean, we've all heard of these examples of right-wing school systems objecting to teaching about slavery, teaching about the civil rights movement, labeling all of this stuff, all this history, CRT, and trying to get it removed. We've all heard these stories, but I don't know that any of this was specifically referenced, and I did watch the debate where McAuliffe said this on stage. None of this specific context, I believe, was brought up. It was a general question about school curriculum, and I think it's reductionist to say that the entire debate about school curriculum and race is about the teaching of history, because I just know firsthand that a lot of the DEI and anti-racist industries seem to have no standard control and are plagued by fraudulence and terrible scholarship. And this stuff gets into sometimes it's schools, sometimes it's
Mainstream
media.
Discourse.
Yeah, it gets into mainstream discourse, and it really is bad. I don't know if you have heard of this lady, Tima Akun. She's a white Norwegian lady who's like an anti-racist instructor. Her work, which is not particularly well regarded in the industry, has made it into New York public schools, the Smithsonian, Seattle City trainings on race. It's extremely common in these settings, and it's very low quality. It's not valid work, but it doesn't seem to get weeded out ever. And so we just have this problem of widespread, in my opinion, fraudulence in this industry, and it is finding its way in the classroom.
Which is right for what's the word I'm looking for here? Manipulation, by right wing partisans.
It feeds the right wing machine, absolutely.
Two things. One, that's impossible to be able to separate in a debate. Unfortunately, that's the one advantage the right wing has when it comes to debates.
Why would
on
it be
something
impossible to separate out in a debate?
Have you ever actually watched a presidential or gubernatorial debate or governor debate or any of those where you've walked away and went, okay, he completely explained what he meant?
Well,
because
there is not time for that. But what
exactly? And the disadvantage is this. Unfortunately,
I was going to say go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the problem then basically goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's a narrative war where it comes down to who has the better talking points, and McAuliffe flubbed it. His counter talking points were not good. You know what I mean? They weren't, because it comes down to talking points, not to full length explanations, but to talking points, and his weren't good.
But wait, but I got to go back because I got to challenge Logic Guy on this. When he asked, how would you challenge that? You didn't really give an answer of how you would challenge that. You told.
He did.
I said I would address problems that were in the curriculum and say that we need to clean them up, among other things. And I would address the problem of learning loss and schools shutting down. I would say, yeah, we need, and I would say that parents should be invited into the conversation. I
would have addressed, with me, I would have addressed the fact that, like, because what the Democrats basically did is they kind of just glossed over, or just outright didn't even acknowledge the genuine frustration with how things had changed because of COVID. You know what I mean? They really didn't. They didn't really, because again, people were rightfully frustrated. Like I know people here around here, you know, the parents who've had to teach people had teach their kids here at school and teach them at home, and it's been hell. Yeah. It's been absolutely miserable having to change the way schools have been. So yeah, school addressing that frustration should have been the thing should have been what they did. Coming at people with understanding, like, yeah, we completely understand why you're frustrated. I completely get how you feel and how you guys feel, and why you guys are much more motivated and more active in how things are done at schools. I completely understand.
I didn't follow the Virginia election that closely, but I did get that impression as well. They didn't seem to be addressing the concerns of COVID, of the shutdown, and of learning loss.
Of the shutdown, of anything. They really didn't address it at all. Whereas Youngkin was whereas Youngkin was all in on the education, and they saying, you know, not shutting down schools and changing the way the curriculum is being taught. Like he did address it.
Yeah, he came in. I mean, again, I really only watched the one debate, but he came in with a few clear-cut talking points on education, and it clearly paid off on huge dividends. And Lozar, the sentiment I'm hearing you say about how it's not possible to push back on these things on the debate stage, I hear this from Democrats so much, and it's so disheartening to me, because it's just a defeatist attitude. If you believe this, if you believe there's no way to push back on talking points on the debate stage, then you don't even have the conditions for victory in that point.
Let me be specific on this. When I'm saying there's no way to push back, I mean there's no way to push back in 3 or 4 debates, a couple of quick videos, and inside of an election cycle.
Why can't simple talking points be answered by other simple talking points?
Because there's not simple answers. Like, that's the problem. Like,
you got to simplify. You have to.
I know you have to.
And the art of the talking point is breaking something complex down into a simple soundbite.
And some things can't be broken down if they're driven by fear.
Yeah,
we eventually got to the point to where we all looked up and said, this Islam thing is not taking us over. We absolutely haven't seen an invasion of ISIS onto our shores. That's effing stupid. But that was, 3 years after that ideology?
It's not because we couldn't. It's because they chose just not to ignore it. You see, the problem with what a lot of people, what a lot of liberals do, especially guilty of this, is just not addressing it at all. They just let the right wing talking points go out, and they just kind of don't really counter it. Because you can counter these things. Yeah, it's a lot more complex than just saying Sharia law isn't taking over, but you can simplify that by having your own better talking points. Again, take the defund the police one, right? Mm-hmm. The Democrat.
Oh, you're opening a whole can of worms now. Now you did it.
Yeah, no. Just here. Let's say here. My counter to this would be like, not a single, like you keep saying that we want to defund the police. And you say you look at the police budget of any city and any city in this country, and the budgets are pretty much the highest in the whole city. The city budget, they're not a single police department was defunded, not one, and not a single Democrat ran on defunded. There may have been a few Democrats who endorsed the slogan or spoke positively of the slogan. I saw like 3 people, and they were mostly most of the squad. but not a single Democrat. I would have came out saying that. Not one. No, we are not defunding the police. Not a single Democrat is running on defunding the police. You look at and I would encourage people, look at your city budgets. You will not see any decrease in the police budget. Not one. Literally, and that's the truth. Literally nowhere. In fact, police budgets went up. So things like that, but you know what I mean? That's how you counter.
That didn't counter anything, though. It went exactly the exact opposite way. One, it created a narrative because we tried defund the police when it was first brought out was to talk about how the funding of the police should be moved to other programs and other ways of being able to fix communities more than just enforce laws. Yeah. What that turned into was, oh, okay, now people are not prosecuting poop on the streets. So now there's poop all over San Francisco streets. That's what defund the police meant. If the cops aren't part of your house, what happens if somebody breaks in? The whole destruction of the way that our country works is because of this. They
started strawmanning the slogan. I know, and again, the counter is still simple. No one's defunding the police. We're not defunding the police.
But what happened, but again, all of that was based off of us trying to simplify a complicated answer. Because unfortunately, when it comes to the left, we really can't simplify a lot of these answers because there's too much nuance. There isn't much nuance in, I have a farm, I've been shooting my entire life. If I have an issue with food, I can just go outside and kill, and everybody should be like that. Which, if you think that's a funny idea of how many of the people on the right think,
a disastrous political point that would go up in flames.
Yeah. Well,
which would be celebrated by much of the right.
But do you think that if Ted Cruz came out and campaigned in all of Texas on if you have a problem, if you can't feed your family, just go out and shoot food in your backyard, you think that would be a successful campaign? I think it would be. He might still win because it's a Republican state, but I think he would run into. I don't think that would be a successful slogan at all.
But that's pretty much what Bootstraps has been.
Well, pretty much is doing a lot of work there, though.
No, it's not though. Because
I want to agree to disagree because you know what I mean. But because my position basically is you can't simplify these complex things. Yours is that you can't, and we just kind of talking in circles at that point.
Yeah, we went from an analogy from CRT in schools to defund the police.
The reason why
hypothetical.
And that's why I wanted to bring up. Like the reason I brought up defund the police was worked in the same way with CRT. Was that it's not true. It's not a thing that's happened. It's not a thing that's happening. It's not a thing that anyone's bringing up. But the problem is that they believe that it is, and that brings up the need to address the mistaken belief. They believe that police departments are going to be defunded. And you have to have a better counter narrative.
I can piggyback on you. Your point isn't hypothetical either, because this did happen, and Biden, at least, and other Democrats came out pretty hard. We do not support funding the police. Bernie Sanders said, I do not support defunding the police. And it seems to me like you have to concede it worked. I mean,
that worked.
Yeah, Biden won substantially, and the Democrats flipped some. I mean, it was a close election overall, but the Democrats flipped some important Senate seats and won both the House and Senate.
They won the election by conceding the narrative.
They didn't concede. How did they concede the narrative?
Because defund the police has never meant let's just take all money from all cops.
Okay, but I don't agree that that's conceding the point. That's choosing what the hill they want to have the battle on and having it on that. And you might not like what it conceded, but they also picked a hill where they won. So you can't say it was completely not successful. They did win the argument.
Wait. If they won the argument, have you seen any programs designed to address mental health that took any financial funding from any police department?
I believe that there were cities where they've. I mean, it's a complicated question because this stuff has to go through so many iterations, and like there was stuff like this that was on the ballot in Minneapolis, right? And it failed in the same election that we're talking about.
It failed even in Minneapolis.
Yeah, but Portland, Oregon. I believe Portland, Oregon has gone towards in this direction. I don't know how.
It's like the only place where it didn't fail.
Yeah. I think New York is also it's just a complicated question because it's not any one thing. It's got to go through all these hoops.
Well, no, it failed because it lost the election but won the narrative. Everybody talking about re-changing or restructuring these police departments, like with the exception of a few.
It won the election, lost the narrative. They they seeded you can argue. I get what you're trying to say about them seeding the narrative. But I'm what's logical is I don't think they seeded it because even if going off of what it literally means to defund the police, they're not literally defunding the police. We know what it really means. Yeah. But it's a lie to say that anyone wants to defund the police. They are, because the right wing boogeyman version is what you're going off of, and it's just like
wait. But what do we call universal health care?
Universal health care.
What is it called?
Medicare for all.
Medicare for all.
What is it called when people talk about it?
I don't know.
Socialism.
Obamacare.
Well, no. Obamacare is something more specific than that.
Stop. I'm talking about how it's brought up, how the narrative is changed. Right wingers are winning the narrative. We might win the election, we might win a couple of back and forths there, but right wingers are winning the narrative literally because they're able to say, oh, this word, like, for example, whiteness. Whiteness has a definition. Whiteness has a reality. Whiteness can't be denied when actually described what whiteness is. There's no way to deny it because it's a true thing. But if you're able to change the narrative of what whiteness means, you can turn it into a completely different beast.
I think whiteness is kind of a troubling example, to be honest.
Actually, on that note, a former coworker of mine, pretty conservative white dude, he asked me, hold on, my wife's calling.
Well, let me just try to explain better what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
The problem is with CRT is Chris Rufo actively pointed out what he was planning to do and knew it was going to work because he knew that this one subject
what he was going to do was freeze the idea of CRT in the minds of the American public in terms that were unflattering to it and flattering to his position.
Sorry about that. I got my wife called me.
Yeah, sure. Everything all right?
No, sorry about that. But
everything all right?
Yeah, I'm good. No, I just had to send her something.
Cool. Lozar was in the middle of a point.
Well, no, I'll say it like this. My Twitter has a thing that I put as my top tweet, which is a 12-point way that the right wing seems to be able to get fear mongering through, and it always loses in the end. Like years after, it's like, oh man, that was absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe we actually believe that. But in the first year and a half, it's almost impenetrable. It's just depending on the time when it happens. And right now, CRT or anti-CRT is winning because it's nearly impossible for people to understand what it is in a small quote.
Okay, Lozar, here's my question to you. Why can't Democrats and liberals and leftists use these 12 points in our favor? Why doesn't it go both ways?
We do. We just do it on stupid stuff.
Okay, but if we use it on smart things, then it would be successful. Yeah.
Yes. If and I'm dead serious. If we actually used it in on things that we know, like for example, that last meeting. If you ever get a chance to watch Mythicist, Rico, I just want you to watch the last conversation. If the left wing watched that last conversation of those 5 near psychopaths talking, and was able to literally push that, like, hey, pay attention to what these people are saying because this is the true goal of many of these people, it will work. But unfortunately, the left wing kind of do it in the sense of like all cops are the person that shot Philando Castillo. So Philando Castillo, I said his name wrong. So all cops are this.
All cops
which
are
works
bad.
for exactly Yeah, which works for exactly 24 seconds until somebody looks up and goes, well, my uncle's a cop, or my dad's a cop, my brother's a cop. And I don't see any of that in them. What are they talking about? This is absolutely insane.
Yeah,
It's
no,
so-
I'm saying that's what I wanted to say earlier. Is that this goes back to the core problem here that is also Democratic Party from not like the activists are bad at it. Democratic Party themselves are especially bad at it, but it's the narrative war. It just goes back to the narrative war, and we choose pretty shit fucking narratives. Like activists choosing ACAB is a shit fucking narrative to try to push. Democrats choose parents. Even implying, parents shouldn't really have a say what's going on in schools during a time where parents are the most during a time where parents are the most frustrated. They're at their most frustrated and most ticked off about how things are going, and you tell them, you even imply something like that, is just bad. That's just bad politics. I would say that the left, that liberals and the left are just bad at politics. It's why we lose to people who are pretty fucking they're pretty fucking dumb, but they're just really good at politics.
Can I push back on that?
Hit me.
It's also who's being targeted. It's very easy to demonize 17 and 19-year-old kids who ran out into the middle of the street arguing or screaming they're angry because somebody got shot. It's very easy to demonize them. It's very easy to find holes in whatever they do or say, which is why the Black Lives Matter movement has so many issues, because it's so many young people talking that there isn't a, hey, you can't really insult these people. It's easy to insult them. But on the other side of that, we're talking about groups that are just as insane, just as over the top, just as absolutely ridiculous. But we have a narrative protection, which are parents. And I respect you so much, but the military definitely has the shield to where if you say anything criticizing not military in general, but criticizing how certain soldiers are,
Well, if you criticize the military in general, they claim it's about a soldier.
You can get away with it more.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, I mean, you can get away with that more now because Afghanistan and Iraq were both crap, and even like the people that defended it the most. But if you sit back and you talk about how like certain people come into conversation that immediately go like, I'm a soldier, so my opinion should be held higher than anybody else's, and a lot of soldiers have done that. You really can't cut that down the same way you would somebody coming in and going, I'm a climate scientist.
So let's take a step back a bit for a second, and let's get a little just to get a bit more clear as to what it is we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, Elijah, if I'm gonna outline some things, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong. So,
hit me.
The issues here, from what I'm understanding, are they said the narrative war and our inability to counter their narratives. The impenetrable nature of their echo chambers, and there are multiple, like I said, using the military as an example. Is there any other thing I'm missing here? I want to make sure I understand the broader points being made here.
Well, I mean, there's the protect the children idea. So if you, no matter what you're arguing, if you make it a protect the children, it's going to be very hard to challenge it without sounding like you're saying F the children. So
we got back into the narrative war.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like each one of what I was going back, piggybacking on what I was just saying. The right wing right now hold the defense of things that we just accept shouldn't really be challenged, where the left doesn't, and that's the problem.
So much of what you're saying, Lozar, hits on this like deep frustration I have with the left, which is they recognize the power of words and media and narrative from the right, but then are very like fatalistic and doomer when it comes to that same power in our hands. We think we assume that we're completely ineffectual at it, where the right is all powerful at it, and I don't know why we assume those two things.
Because one, our apathy. Like Think about it. If Donald Trump didn't exist, would we have won that election?
It's
110%.
impossible to say because it would just be totally different.
Yeah, I would say the issue is not so much as apathy, but it's more or less it's.
I want to push back on that. I just want to push back on that. I'm not saying it's impossible. I honestly believe it was 110% possible for, I'm sorry. I'm saying it's 110% Biden would have lost against anyone else that wasn't Donald Trump.
I mean, how can you like? Are you assuming that the person would be the incumbent
That's an
president?
entirely. I would say that's an entirely separate hypothetical
Yeah.
that I think we if we get into this, we're just going to derail into something else.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that on that note, that I wouldn't call it apathy. It's just compare the left and the right. Here on the right, there is a uniformity that exists that does not exist to the center left, and the left. And that uniformity makes them better organized, better able to mobilize, and better able to keep their ducks in a row. And that is what needs to be taken into consideration: is that we don't have that. We don't have that uniformity. We disagree on so much; it's fucking ridiculous to the point that it makes us ineffectual. We don't have a uniform fucking way of talking about things, about talking about issues. We don't have uniform talking points. We don't have uniform basically anything. There is no uniformity from the top down, from like you said, from even neoliberals. It's just no fucking uniformity whatsoever. And so this is why like I'm basically closing out, just using a kind of to try to summarize my position on this is that the reason we don't win these narrative wars is because we don't have a uniform narrative on anything. Whereas the right does on every issue. They have uniform talking points. They have a uniform narrative. They get them from the top down. That is disseminated through a media machine that, again, we don't have a left-wing equivalent to. Liberals hardly have an equivalent to it. Like, you know what I mean? It's that, and that's what it boils down to. It's not impossible, which means it's not impossible to counter these narratives. It's just that we lack the uniformity to have the power to push any one narrative in the same way that they can. That's my position.
I slightly disagree on the reason why we lack these things. I mean, I think all the things you brought up are valid, but also I think for whatever reason on the left, we just don't seem to recognize the validity of narrative in media. We constantly like dismiss it as frivolous for reasons that I really don't understand.
What we do is we dissect and deconstruct narratives. We don't create our own enough in a way that we're able to disseminate through simple enough talking points for everybody to understand. That's my belief, at least. Like there's a lot of.
I'm reading Ben Burgess's book, Canceling Comedians, and I agree with. I'm a fan of his. I agree with so much of what he says, but at one point he says that like political comedy isn't. I forget the exact words he uses, but he says it won't change the world. And I find that everything else he talks about media and messaging seems so on point, and it seems like such a bizarre miss for him to not connect the dots there and see how if media and messaging do matter, then actually comedy can be a really vital way of expressing that. And I honestly believe it can change the world. And Mr. Saul Alinsky agrees with me because in his Rules for Radicals, he says that comedy and ridicule are our most powerful weapons. And I agree with that. And I wish more leftists would kind of ponder on that and think on that for a little bit.
Well, I would say leftists are always constantly playing a game of catch up. And we'll always have to play the game of catch up because whatever we're challenging is something that has become the norm, where for them, they're challenging something that's new. Something that's new is easier to.
That's necessarily catch up, though. Like challenging the status quo is how movements begin. It's where new ideas come from.
Well, on that note, I actually want to piggyback off that a little bit. Is think about the vectors with which our narratives get filtered through. You know what I mean? For us on the left, our vector through which any narrative that we believe in, anything that we believe in, no matter how nuanced, gets filtered through the Democratic Party. and through liberals, and we've seen how that looks. It looks like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and them taking a knee in a kente cloth in the wake of George Floyd's.
And Los, you're saying the Democrats can't do narrative, and yet that exists. Come on, man.
You get what I'm saying? It's just like you got to think about the vectors through which these things, through which our narratives go through, and when it's filtered through a lot of liberals completely fumble the fucking ball. You know what I mean? Whereas the vectors through which right-wing media, with the right-wing narratives go through, it is beat for beat, word for word, disseminated the exact way.
Well, no, I'll try. I'll try my original statement again. What I'm saying that leftists are always playing game of catch up. They're always the things that we stand on are things that are the most important things to the left are things that are drastic changes to the way that the United States works. So for climate change, we'd have to do a drastic change to how our entire way of I guess being in the last few years have changed. For CRT, there's been a push to change our idea of post-racial America or colorblind society.
Our ideas of race, really, race itself.
Really. Yeah, that's going to have an immediate pushback. For women's rights, for trans rights, for LGBT, well, I shouldn't just say trans rights, for LGBTQ rights. And unfortunately, because we are constantly challenging the status quo, it is a lot easier for our opponents to find the most radical versions of these arguments and make these arguments central than it is for us to be able to find the most radical let's keep things the way they are.
We're pretty good at that.
I think correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, what you're saying, and I think I agree with you here, is that it's a lot easier to defend the status quo than it is to basically replace it, which is what the left is arguably trying to do, is replace it, to redefine it, that's where a lot of our deconstructions and criticisms come from. Whereas they get home field advantage because they can just basically defend the status quo by either halting change or regressing any kind of change that would happen.
Well, think of the one of the primary arguments against I guess CRT or even racial criticism of the United States. There's two arguments that usually come on the right. Either don't talk about it at all and it'll fix itself, or it's not as big as people are portraying it, and we basically fixed most of our problems in the 60s.
I mean, ironically, James Hensley thinks that we're done, that we won, that racial progress has already been made, that racism has already been defeated. Like he literally argued that already.
Yeah,
and our argument is that he says MLK won, and it's like, no, he didn't, and that's kind of the point. That's the counterpoint that we try to bring up. And you know what I mean? But there are a lot of white people who genuinely believe that racism was defeated. But
that's the thing. You see the difficulty.
Yeah, no, I think he's agreeing with you, Losar.
No, but what I'm saying is that difficulty is far more apparent than I think that we would like to accept to believe.
Oh, no doubt.
To look up and say, as a person as a 98% white community, the reason why we're 98% white is because there was a concerted effort to prevent African Americans from buying property here. And we've accelerated the cost of living to the point where unless you actually have a substantial amount of money or you're moving laterally, it's going to be nearly impossible to move into this area. That's going to be hard to sell to a community that has told themselves, we're not racist. Nobody around here is racist.
No doubt. They absolutely don't want to believe. They absolutely do not want. And again, hence why the James Lindsay's of the world are so attractive to them, because they get to maintain their status quo and maintain the feeling of like they don't feel racist. They don't want to, because obviously racist bad. Being a racist is just invariably a bad thing. Even racists accept that now. And they don't try to be explicitly racist because they know being racist equals bad.
And that's what I'm saying is that's our overall disadvantage as left wingers, because our disadvantage is.
But it's not impossible. Your argument earlier was basically that's impossible.
Well, for one thing, for CRT in a matter of a few months. I guarantee you, if we have this conversation again in about a year and a half, we're going to be making fun of the idiots who push CRT because they were absolutely
the reason
ridiculous.
why, though, the reason why not is because it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of the vectors through which our narratives go through. And again, our vectors are the fucking Democratic Party. Our vectors are Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Terry McAuliffe. These are our vectors of our counter narratives. These are the people.
But Rico, that's our fault.
And that's why.
That's our fault. That's not anybody else's fault but ours. Because
Who's
this is
who's we here?
people on the left.
I didn't vote for them motherfuckers.
It doesn't matter who you vote for, Rico. Okay, I know you're going to agree with me when I finish this sentence. Who are our two biggest leftist streamers currently?
The Hasanabi and Vosh.
That's what I would say as well.
Now, Vosh and Hassan have said multiple ridiculous, stupid, incredibly off the wall, crazy things on a constant basis that make you question why they're the two biggest streamers. But what we don't do as leftists is we don't go to smaller streamers. We don't support them. We don't lift them up. We don't give them any attention. We genuinely look at somebody and goes, this person's famous, and we put all of our backing behind them, no matter how bad they are.
I think the reason for that is because people only have so much bandwidth with regards to whom we.
And but the right has the same bandwidth.
Yeah, the right is 100% better about this. They have this machine and this chain for funneling resources, and there's always some new right wing guy popping off.
Actually, I want to counter that. There are only a handful of the untouchables, like Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, there's tons of these dudes. There's a bunch we've never even heard of who have
there's a lot of
followers.
Rico, let me tell you how fast this works. Let me show you how fast this works. Dead serious. Ben Shapiro brought on a guy named oh my gosh, my brain just blanked out.
The guy's name was Carolyn Barashenko, and now she has 100 million followers, and she's the biggest right-wing
Great
guy.
example.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Carolyn Barashenko was insane from the moment she stepped onto the scene. But what everybody on the right did was went, hey, let's bring this person on. Let's boost her. And all the people that followed Ben Shapiro or somebody else started following Carlin.
The only problem with his analogy, Losar, is that it arguably backfired. And this is probably an example of maybe how their support network is too promiscuous. Because who wants Carolyn Barashenko on their side? No one.
But the right does it. The right does this. If the minute somebody makes a mistake, they immediately back off of them and go, you know what? We didn't even think that guy was that popular anyway, and keep moving.
I don't agree that they have a much more functioning media. It's just the right-wing media base, for the most part, are pretty much lemmings. But again, even then, the people that get propped up don't last very long. Like I said, the untouchables aren't going anywhere, no matter what they say and do, no matter how many gas that they make, no matter what. But everyone else, like, say, for example, Diamond and Silk, propped up by Trump himself, gone.
Are they really gone?
They're not gone.
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
Not gone. They're definitely not gone.
They got canned. They got shit canned from Fox, and then by their own fucking words, they're saying like they got canned for saying the same things that their white counterparts were saying.
Rico, so did Michelle Malkin. Michelle Malkin has been canned from every right-wing group that she's on.
Glenn Beck got canned from Fox News, and that dude's still huge.
Michelle Malkin still goes to every single CPAC. Michelle Malkin still has a motivated following. Whenever Michelle Malkin speaks, those people follow. We don't have people like that.
She's jumped around. She's jumped around, and now she's a part of the Dark Horse podcast type people that are just full on anti-vaxxers. She's fallen from grace. She is not where she once was.
Well, look, obviously this stuff changes, but I think Losar's point is really solid, that there's just a support network for new voices and on the right that doesn't exist on the left. On the left, we're much more likely to tear each other down.
That goes to because of the lack of uniformity. Because you go to the right, they're all basically saying some variation of the exact same thing, or just the exact same thing. And anyone get propped up for doing that, for however long that lasts. Now, I argue not very long, but long enough to do some damage. But on the left, it's again, there's no uniformity whatsoever. There is no concerted support network. There is just everyone shouting, and only a few get the luxury of actually being the top voices. Of
Well,
some
I'm
kind.
gonna push back on everyone shouting. The left has the exact opposite. We don't really have the fiery person that literally says nonsense but screams out a bunch of stuff and people cheer for him. We don't have
I
many
mean,
people
literally
like
shouting.
that.
I mean, like everybody's saying something from some different angle, and to the point that it gets so niche and esoteric that a lot of people that it's not really all that surprising that they don't really uh get anywhere. You know what I mean? Because the left is deconstructing everything. There are so many different little pockets of the left, so many different things going on the left that it's kind of hard to have that same.
But this is a point that
uniform
agrees with what Losar's saying. We're so in our niches that we don't function as a whole, and that's something that the right has less trouble with.
We don't function as a unit at all. Again, that's what I think.
That's what Losar's saying, though, right, Losar? Like that. This is what your criticism is, right?
Well, yeah, basically that. Wait, hold on. No. But I'm saying it more along the lines of, no matter how crazy somebody gets on the right, as long as they say certain of the right things, the right's not going to throw them into the water and completely abandon them. There's going to be, there's challenges, there's back and forths, granted, but for the most part, if you look at how many just regular guys sitting in their car talking to a camera are on the right and are making are getting hundreds of thousands of followers instantly compared to left wingers who do 6 or 7 hour
You know who's a great example of this? Who you were talking to me about recently, Losar? Gothix. She came out of nowhere. She has 250,000 followers.
Yep.
And she's not doing anything different than there's literally 25, 35 people doing the same thing as her.
Head scratching, contradictory nonsense, but she says the 5 tenets of what you expect a black conservative to say, and they immediately link to it.
And
not just link to her, but she's on the Blaze now, apparently.
I was gonna say, like, do not discount how much that shit is artificial. I mean, just as a prime example, it was found to be the case that Donald Trump, I think it was at least half of his following were bots. You know what I mean? At least half. And this has been known to be the case for a lot of the internet, a lot of right-wing media persons. They pay to get artificially boosted by algorithms and whatnot that get themselves propped up in ways that there is no liberal to left-wing equivalent to. Like, a lot of their shit is artificially propped up. It still works in the same way that it gets them eventually on notice by more mainstream right-wing media personalities, like like Ben Shapiro and the Blaze, yada yada yada, Fox News and whatnot. But
that works.
And it works. We don't have that, and I think it's kind of good we don't artificially prop ourselves up. But
wait. I mean, even though you think it's good that we don't do it, it works for the short term.
I also think the entire phenomenon cannot be accounted for with just like bots and fake followers. I'm sure this is a prominent thing that is done in certain circles, but that's not to say that all those people don't have real support and real audiences.
And again, short-term victory is all the right wing needs. They're not looking for right wing victory or for long-term victory. For example, climate change. Let's go. I love going to this because it's something that
Before we do that, I want to do one thing, and that's the original thing we came to talk about was Virginia. So I want to hear a summary of everyone's points on that, and then we can just drop that entirely. I don't think I got to a point where any of us came to any kind of conclusive statement on that, and I would like us to do that.
Sounds like a great idea. Who wants to go first?
So, start with you, Losar. Your conclusive statement, assessment, whatever, on Virginia and CRT.
It's not defeatist, but Virginia was going to happen. The way it went down is exactly the way it was supposed to happen, because that's kind of how America's always ran.
So you don't think there's any lesson to be taken from Virginia then?
Not really. And I know it's going to be a challenge that I understand, but not really. When it comes to scaring the hell out of a bunch of people for a short amount of time, right wingers are great at that. And until we find a way until we find a way to localize our message and not just rely on a couple of big name figures to challenge anything, we're never going to get through to the ground, to get the ground swell enough to be able to fight in midterms and short-term elections.
All right, Logic Guy, your turn.
All right. I think that there is a real lesson to take from Virginia, which is that I think it proves it's the case that proves that the right has been capable of using the CRT talking point successfully in politics and weaponizing that narrative. And the Democrats were caught completely flat-footed and simply saying there's no such thing as CRT. It's not in schools. It's a complex legal theory that's only in universities is not a sufficient answer to the challenge. The Democrats have to get a lot more sophisticated about this. And I also think that the dishonesty of the term CRT is not one way. It's not just Republicans. It's Democrats too. Both sides are kind of attempting to capitalize off and using the term CRT as a term of art and hiding behind its vagueness when convenient. The only difference is that the Republicans are doing so very effectively and the Democrats are doing so very ineffectually. And both sides have introduced CRT anti-racist DEI terms into the mainstream. Republicans have done so through their Fox News media apparatus, and Democrats have done so through, or maybe not Democrats, but the liberal left, whatever have you, have done so through the $8 billion a year DEI anti-racism industry that is increasingly common in America. It's increasingly common to encounter this stuff in the workplace, in the school, in the university. I work for a consulting firm, so I'm talking to people from all different companies. This stuff is really, really common in the workplace. I know people just in life, friends who have had this at their school and or in place of employment, and most of these people are very left wing, and typically their experiences with it are not very positive. And I think Democrats need to come up with a real answer to that.
So, in short, to summarize both of you, Losar, your statement is that the backlash was inevitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Logic Guy, yours is that even if it's inevitable, effectively the right wing are just better at weaponizing the same thing that we're weaponizing than we are. We need to get better.
I don't think it was inevitable at all. I would never think politics.
Yes, that was my bad. But basically, essentially, that they're better at it, at the narrative push on these things, on the discussion of race and equity, inclusion, and all these things. Even if obviously we don't like their version of it, they're better at it than we are, and we need to get better.
Yeah, let me actually elaborate on one thing there before you go, Rico.
Sure.
If you're an advocate of CRT ideas, Losar, I know you are. I think it's obvious that I'm a little more skeptical about a lot of them, although I do agree with many of them. If you're an advocate of this stuff, you should be concerned by the low level of quality in the field. This is a field that has really, and Losar, you and I have talked about this before, this is a field that's opened itself up to all manner of just frauds and crazy people and invited them in, and there doesn't seem to be any penalty for just saying things that are either not supported by evidence or just outright wrong. And
wait, I'm lost on what you're talking about, because if you're doing the thing where it's like Robin DiAngelo and Ibram X. Kendi are CRT and CRT should call them out.
This is just we're arguing about definitions. I'm saying it's very likely.
No, wait.
Okay, go on.
Wait, let me finish. They aren't as big, and they're not being paid millions of dollars to.
I would ask of one thing of you, Logic.
Yeah.
Could you name one thing that you would say is problematic DEI? You know what I mean? The thing that you say, name one specific like type of training or rhetoric that they're pushing that meets that standard what you're saying.
Yes, I can. There is a woman named, I mentioned her earlier before. Her name is Tema Oken. She's a Norwegian white lady who is a somewhat well-known person in this space. She kind of blew up earlier this year when Matt Iglesias wrote a blog entry about her, calling attention to her. But her work is very widely cited in places like, for instance, the Smithsonian, in a story that received some controversy a year or two ago. And one of the things her work...
What was her work in it? Huh? What was her work in this?
He's getting there.
Yeah. I was just going to cite it. She said things about how white supremacy is focusing on the written word and being on time and stuff that sounds to me like a really rancid form of race essentialism. I can provide an exact link to what.
Wait, because I think I know what you're talking about. Are you talking about the aspects and assumptions? Video or thing?
It wasn't a video.
Okay.
It was something that was on the Smithsonian website.
It was a pamphlet called Aspects and Assumptions of White Culture.
Yes,
or white.
Yes. That is
okay.
it.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah.
What's happening there is, on its face, it looks incredibly bad. But you have to ignore what they mean by aspects and assumptions.
But there was more than that. Like it went into depth, labeling all of these attitudes as whiteness in a way that I think really sounded like race essentialism.
And it does sound like it, but they're not saying this is because they're white. They're saying
I'm not going to agree about this.
And that's and actually want to summarize, and then that's the problem. Then is that if the first thing that comes to anyone's mind from the thing that you're saying is something negative, you've already fucked up. You know what I mean? If you look at that at face value, it looks like race essentialism. In your explanation, if you find yourself having to explain yourself, you've already fucked up. You know what I mean? Because if at face value, the face value should not be a negative, do not draw a negative reaction like that.
And that's the problem. Unfortunately, and that's why I keep pushing back on this. When it comes to pointing out how race has moved in the United States, it's nearly impossible to talk about it without creating that type of response from at least, I'd say, 33 to 40% of the country.
The language you use matter, and if what you say is worship of the written word is white supremacy, I mean, you're telling me as a black guy you don't take some offense to that?
No, because that's not what. And again, you're asking somebody that actually like.
That's why if that's her quote, if that's what she said, then that's a problem. You know what I mean?
That's not what she said completely. What she's saying is white supremacy was created at a certain time to make certain aspects and assumptions appear white. They're trying to racialize ideas, and I'm talking about not CRT.
Like being on time. I got you.
Yeah.
When it was created, when it was first brought in, there was a racialized aspect to certain good ideas or good beliefs to make it white.
Yeah, that's why I mean a good example is that is how I basically grew up. And people telling me, because of they associated my good behavior with being white and bad behavior with being black. You say I act white because I speak properly. You know what I mean?
And that's what she's highlighting. She's highlighting, but she's again, it's.
Well, sir, I think that you're steel manning what is actually on the website and what is actually appearing.
That's what matters is what's actually on the website. Like, what is the words actually being used?
You're rephrasing it in a way that is less controversial. But the problem is that that's not what is on the Smithsonian website, and it's not what's being taught in the Seattle government.
I don't know about the Seattle government, but
the Seattle government and also New York City schools were using some of her materials in anti-racist training as well as.
And that right there is a problem that goes back to framing. Framing is everything. It doesn't matter if you're right. If you frame shit poorly, it's you're fucked.
Like,
And
even if you're right on the substance, the framing matters, and that's what logic is pointing out.
I think even if you want to defend what she's saying from an academic standpoint, Lozar, you should still acknowledge that this isn't a good ambassador of these ideas. This isn't something to export into K through 12 schools and the workplace.
I'm making two separate points.
Okay.
One, that is absolutely the worst way of being able to argue that. But I'm also saying that's also going to be incredibly difficult to argue it, period. Which is why, if those are the issues that are in schools, 110%, and I think every single person said that, 110%, that can be opposed. I agree with people who have studied their entire lives CRT and are watching people tie in whiteness studies, or I can't remember what the other one is called, but it's
Let me give you a prime example. This is because this was what I was actually trying to bring up earlier, but then my wife called and all that.
Your wife, a white women shutting you down again.
Yep, shutting me down. Shutting down a black man trying to talk. I tell you that we have regressed to the past. I tell you what.
Can you not white explain?
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. What I was trying to say was he brought up abolish whiteness, and
Wait, who brought it up?
even though my coworker, conservative white dude, he brought up. He says, "What do you think about abolish whiteness?" And I'm just like, in my head, I already knew. I was like, "Oh my fuck!"
You were like, "Oh,
because
I hate Mondays."
it's like, even if you understand the nuance of what's being said, that's a terrible fucking slogan.
The problem with that slogan is it only communicates to the already initiated and doesn't communicate across
It only communicates to the people who already understand the nuance. Anyone outside of that who sees that are immediately troubled.
Immediately troubled. I think that's fair.
That's when he brought that up, and in my head I already knew. I'm like, oh boy, and that's why I fucking hate activist speak. I hate the vectors through which liberals jump to these fucking DI industries, is because they use just very, very they use the type of jargon that is incomprehensible to anyone outside of the know, that is just easy pickings for right-wing partisans to turn into to villainous talking points to boogeymen.
This is exactly the point that mayoral candidate in Buffalo, New York, I believe, was making, where she said that I don't know if she was talking about Democrats or leftists that don't speak normal people talk. And
they don't, and that's the problem. They don't speak normal people language, and they use a bunch of jargon, and that jargon is easily weaponized, and that's our fucking problem.
So we're saying that. I just want each of you to explain how to, and I agree with you, but how do you present whiteness to schools? Not whiteness itself, not the word, just the idea, in a way that will not instantly be seen as anti-white.
So earlier in this talk, I quoted someone. I didn't say who it was. It was a Freddie DeBoer from a certain from a recent blog entry of his. But I'll just reiterate what he said. What is the advantage in talking about whiteness instead of saying, "Hey, black people have faced unfair disadvantage. A free and fair society needs to address this. Here's a program to help." That's how I would say it.
Okay, so then my response to that is, are you saying black people are inferior? Can they not survive in the United States?
No.
Are they so weak that they need... No. I understand what you're arguing. I'm telling you, I'm giving you the response to that. Are you saying that black people are victimized to the point where they can't succeed in the United States? Because that's how I feel what you're saying is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that black people in the United States have faced, unique obstacles to success, and unique economic obstacles that need to be addressed. That's what I would say.
Sure, but that still tells me, and I'm basically giving you their arguments.
That's still vastly better than saying abolish whiteness.
But it gives the same effect.
It does not.
I don't think it does give the same effect. I really have to disagree. Like, you are correct that people would still argue with it. There's nothing we can say about race in America that everyone's going to agree with. I mean, at least 45% of people are going to be against it. But that difference between 45% and 55% is extremely important.
I
Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of how I kind of did how I talk about race and how about those unique disadvantages to Black people. About I to the same white conservative. He didn't believe me when I said that a lot of our roads and highway structures are play a role in the disenfranchisement of Black people. Here, because his first reaction was, well, so what are you saying? Roads are racist? I'm saying no. The people who made them had very racist intentions with how they designed the road, the highway system, the neighborhoods they decided to bulldoze down, the businesses they decided to make inaccessible.
The infrastructure
they had a very
was racist.
The infrastructure allotment was. I told him that the infrastructure allotment itself was racist. I brought that up about. It's not about the roads being racist. I'm not going to say
that response on his part sounds so like learned to me, like something he like absorbed from like right wing culture.
Oh, yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like, so if someone tries to talk about how infrastructure allotment in America hasn't been 100% fair, then a good response is, oh, so you're saying roads are racist? Like just like some complete like Sargon of Akkad level like response.
It's an easy knee jerk response, but the response, but I'm not going to use. I'm not saying the type of thing that scare people like abolish whiteness. I'm saying, hey, this is an example of the unique barriers to prosperity that Black people have faced in this country, because he agreed that Black people have been disenfranchised. He just didn't know how they have. He didn't understand how. So that's why we brought on the conversation. And I explained to him, these are the ways, from the way our infrastructure was built to the environmental protection laws with regards to where companies are like allowed to dump a lot of the pig shit and whatnot and spray that into the air, to which they do so in, like here in North Carolina as an example, in lower income, typically Black non-white communities. Again, I made sure to cite my sources. I showed him this shit. He was like, oh
wow,
oh shit. And I was like, yeah, this is what, like, these are the real lived examples. And you want to speak in and at no point did I ever use any jargon. At no point did I ever use any type of, activist speak. One way to put it, or DEI language. I simply said, these are an example how infrastructure was built through Black neighborhoods. A lot of Black people were forced to fucking move. A lot of Black businesses went under as a result, and thus kind of increasing that poverty. You know what I mean? There's no slogan here, really. There's no jargon. It's just this is something he can understand, and you have to. We can't use slogans the way that they can. But you can say, if we're gonna, you can say more things like, just to simplify that, is that because again, talking about whiteness gets us nowhere, but talking about the way our infrastructure was built to built at the expense of Black people for the benefit of white people, gets us somewhere.
Where does it get us? Where does it get us? What solution did he agree with you on after you gave him that understanding?
I told him, like, because he actually asked me that, like, where do we go from? He was like, well, then, where do we go from there? I'm like, well, do we really need all these roads? Can we not turn these areas back into neighborhoods and back into livable neighborhoods? You know what I mean? Can we not rebuild low income housing, where they affordable housing, where they in the places where the roads basically bulldozed to do so? That's what my solution was, to just turn things back to the way they were. And he was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But then what are we going to do? Do we drive, or do we just build roads elsewhere? Which segued into a conversation about, and this is, I'm pretty pro, less cars on the road, the better anyways. You know what I mean? So that segued into that. And I told him, I was like, look, I'm pretty pro, like, the less cars on the road, the better anyways, which eventually we stopped there.
Well, yeah, you pretty much stopped at the place where I thought you were pretty much going to stop. Because even if you get many people to agree that there was, and I know nobody likes the jargon term systemic racism, but it's the term that fits. At the end of the day, when you try to push ideas of how people can get to an understanding and actually try to address it, that's where the problem comes in line. So no matter what you call it, no matter what you name it, when you start pushing ideas on how to fix it, that's where they're trying to oppress white people in order to push black people better.
Just because
starts kicking in,
this guy,
which is the same.
This guy at his work isn't like now like Martin Luther King. Getting him from I don't understand the problem at all to okay, I now acknowledge this problem, but I'm against any solution to it. That's still progress. That's how you move the dial. It's little incremental movements like that.
It's increment because I promise you, we went nowhere. When he asked me the question about what do I think about abolish whiteness, that conversation went fucking nowhere. When it started from a really bad fucking slogan that even I can't, even though I understand the nuance of it, can't really explain.
I want you to do me a favor, Rico. When you go back to ever talking to this person, I want you to tell me how long into the conversation you get before you hear, yeah, I admit slavery happened, but can you blame me for slavery for my entire life? I want you to tell me the exact amount of time into this conversation you get before those words are said.
But what would that prove, though?
Well, we've had similar conversations like that.
I know
before.
anyone who's ever talked to a white conservative has had that conversation, including me.
Because even if there is an admission that yes, something bad happened to black people, the second conversation, the one that actually matters, the one that decides whether or not something gets fixed, goes completely off the rails, because the idea is, even though something bad happened to you, something bad happened to everyone, shut up.
But the first conversation informs the second conversation. I think that's why the first conversation is important.
Exactly. I've been down that road, and at one point in time, I didn't really know how to respond to that, but now I do, in that it's I usually just tell them, no, I'm not saying that you're guilty of anything. That's not the point here. You just kind of just deflect from it and just like, no, that's not the point here. The point is, this is a problem. Here's my solution. And it's not. And I tell them it's not a zero-sum game, because that's what the foundation of that is to believe that it's zero-sum. That to help them is to help black people be to hurt them, to take from them. And I'm like, no, that's not how this is going down. That's not what my solutions propose. But again, the point is to be able to get.
No matter what you say, that's what they're going to view. Your response is going to be, even if they completely get to the point where it's like, oh man, I completely understand what you're saying, and I haven't even thought of that. At the end of the day, they're still going to say, but even though I haven't even thought of that, I didn't do any slavery. I didn't hold any slaves. So just kind of get over it. America has fixed everything that's happened in that amount of time. Stop complaining.
Well, let me explain. Actually, on that note, usually the response is like, they're like, well, what about white people? I don't think reparations are fair. Shouldn't white people get reparations? And I'm like, yes. Yeah, if you have been screwed out of, and my answer to that, they usually surprised when I say that. I'm like, if you have been screwed out of your rights and freedoms and what's the word I'm looking for? Not product of your labor, but the wealth that your labor generates. You should be that your labor generates. You should be given reparations for that. You know what I mean? If you have been what's the word? I always forget.
What basically, you're doing is you're talking about these issues in universal terms, as opposed to like racialized terms, which I do think in a multicultural society like our own, or a pluralistic society like our own, is a very helpful thing to do.
That is what I do. Like I speak. I try generally to when I acknowledge race, I acknowledge the disparate and very specific, not esoteric shit like whiteness, but the very, very specific instances of discriminatory policies that have been enacted that hurt, very specific people. I avoid those esoteric conversations entirely. Every time he even goes anywhere near them, I'm like, nope, we're not doing that. We're not having that conversation because it's effectively useless. It goes, long story short, I avoid those esoteric conversations when it comes to race and specifically stick to the more material ones, again, when it comes to race. But generally, I'm universal.
Which 110% works until you get to 1350.
Which is easy to explain, funnily enough.
It's easy to explain, but you have to get esoteric to explain it. You have to go into that world.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You do not have to get esoteric to explain the 1350.
Rico, what's your answer to 1350? Just describe it first, just in case anyone doesn't know.
The 1350 is basically, despite black people making up 13% of the population, they are, convicted or commit or arrested. I can't remember what the specific word is, but 50% of the crime. Commit 50% of the murders. Yeah. Is that what it is? I thought it was like convicted or arrested.
Well, I mean, it ends up being arrested, but it's 50% of the murders. I think it's like.
Are you sure the murders?
Yeah.
I always feel like
When it first came out, it was just about murders. But then
it was just about murders.
But then it moved over to crime overall and stuff like that. But 1350 initially was talking about murder.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Very well then. Yeah. No, I always thought it was just being arrested, but I always thought it's just a matter of proportion. They say 50% of the murders. 50% of the murders of who exactly? Because white people who commit, it's white on white crime. Well over 50% of the murders of other white people.
I don't want you to leave before the Y tree ends, because I'm starting the Y tree.
Yeah, no. I just tell them that it's a matter of proportion to population. Like, who are we talking about? It's like 50% of everybody or 50% of the respective population. You know what I mean? It's because that number gets skewed. They basically just say 50% overall, and I'm just like, so 13% of the population is just killing 50% of the people. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, 13% of the population is 50% of the murders. Commit 50%.
50% of the murders.
The definitions I found of it is just say violent crime, which is how I remembered it as well. But you might be correct that the earliest iterations of it were murders.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Murder, violent. It changes around from to like violent crime in general, and I'm just like, look, it's a matter of proportion to population and the respective state of that population. You know what I mean? Because it's like, white people commit actually more violent crimes, but that's because, again, they're the majority of the population. You know what I mean? And like, so I remember looking up the statistics on that myself, and I was like, that's not true on the whole 1350 thing. I was like, no, black people commit disproportionately more violent crime, but again, mostly targeted towards other black people. But as far as overall violent crime, it's white people, and it's white on white. So that's what I usually tell them, and that usually shuts them up on that one because they don't really go anywhere further from there.
Well, I don't know who you're talking to, but most of them would.
Any consumer I've talked to.
Most of them would be able to find the FBI crime statistics and show you where it is actually 50% of violent crime. But it's nearly impossible to give the argument of why violent crime is so prevalent in that population without explaining how that population got to be where it is. And you're not going to be able to do that without you don't have to use the words. You can use whatever words you want, but you're going to have to differentiate between poverty in general and and how race has affected this country. There's no way to answer that question without. Well, there's a way to answer it, but then you get into like IQ and stuff like that.
I mean, no, you can speak on the effects of over policing. You can speak on the effects of lead poisoning. You can speak on the effects of just poverty in general, and the lack of generational, not just wealth, but also generational knowledge that is kind of fed to these very specific things, very provable things that all factor into people's violent nature because a lot of the 1350 people try to do is argue the inherent violence of non-white people, of black people, where the goal is to don't play on their field on the whole notion of inherently violent. Is the goal is to point out that this is more of a human, this is more about human nature, or rather human nurture, than it is about anyone's inherent nature. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, but
I am coming down with Losar here, that I think that it's a complex thing to talk about and explain. I think it challenges the notion of just being able to put things in like easy to digest sound bites. Because I mean, your answer was complicated, Rico. You know, it's something you'd have to.
It's complicated. I try to be simple, but it is complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated. I'll see it on that one. It's a complicated fucking thing.
And unfortunately, the short terms that people are like, stuff like, again, whiteness and all that stuff like that, that is, I
gotta get going. My mom keeps calling me, and it doesn't sound good.
All right.
All right. I was going to say that you didn't give your final words on the Virginia election.
On the Virginia thing, hey, mine is that fucking basically both of you are right, and that backlash is inevitable. It's pretty easy to but the backlash is much less racialized than we think. I think it had a lot more to do with COVID and the lockdowns and the effects that being locked down, the schools being shut down, had on parents. And I think we could have communicated to people's grievances a lot better, but just didn't, because, as I've said before, Democrats and most of the liberal media is pretty fucking dog shit at communicating people's grievances the way they should, the way they could have.
Sides, radical centrism, fence sitting, and the liberal media is bad.
You know what I mean? It's yep.
All right.
With that being said,
hey,
y'all have a good night.
Both for coming on. You know, you're my only 2 returning guests ever, so that puts you tied for number 1 in my book. So thanks a lot. It was a really great conversation.
Cool. All right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'll catch you guys later.
All right, man. Hey, Rico, good luck with your mom. I hope she's okay.
Walk away, walk away, walk away. Hey, we gotta move on to a better day. Hey, we gotta make a change in it right away. Hey, all these people out here straight selling souls. That's the devil in disguise fighting for his goals. Yeah, walk away, walk away, walk away.